So I see a couple of people in the back there just trying to fill into the last few rows. So if you wouldn't mind just like raising your hand in the back or wherever, just to make sure that everyone has a seat, that would be fantastic. Just so we all have a nice seat to go sit down for 30 minutes. So I think we're ready to get started here. So welcome everyone. Thank you for coming to the Helm Deep Dive. My name is Matt Fisher. I'm a software engineer over at Microsoft. My other partner, Adam Reese, who's also a core maintainer and is also a software engineer at Microsoft, he unfortunately has the flu, so he's not able to make it, so we're just going to be flying solo today. But we wish him here, and he's here in spirit with us all. So before we quickly go into this, who here is a Helm core maintainer? And are there any charts maintainers in the room? Sweet. The ambassador wave, yes. So I'm going to call upon you guys eventually if we're doing questions. So what we're going to try and do here is we're going to try and go through the content really quickly. I'm just going to give a little bit of a high-level overview of some of the things that has happened or has already happened in Helm 3 in the Alpha 1 release. You've already started hearing a couple of things here and there during the conference. Some of the plans that we're thinking of getting to next, and then we're just going to go straight into Q&A. We did this at KubeCon North America 6 months back, I think it was. And it was really, really helpful to go through the Q&A and just have this like face-to-face conversation with the core maintainers here, the charts maintainers. So really this is like helpful for your time to get these kind of feedback and to understand these questions that we're getting from the community. So, current state of Helm. So before we quickly go into the state, I just want to talk about the Helm Summit. This is happening in September 11th and 12th over in Amsterdam. We currently have CFPs currently open, so if any things come and spring to your mind as we're going through the Q&A and you get like a thought or an idea, please, happy to submit in a CFP or talk to me afterwards and I'm happy to review your CFPs and kind of go through the process. We're also open for sponsorships for the Helm Summit, so if you are an interested vendor to sponsor the summit, you can either talk to myself or Karen, and I can direct you to them. So, okay. So let's talk about current Helm 2, our plan for what we've been doing for the past couple of months. So from the core maintainer side of things, from the CLI, we've been working and focusing on the stability of Helm 2 as we're going into this new transition with Helm 3 and going through and developing some of the new features and the new shiny into the new project. So Helm 2 is currently under active maintenance. We are working on making sure that it is stable for users to continue building upon their platforms, their applications, and everything else. What this means from a practical standpoint of view is that we are actively fixing bugs, any kind of issues that we're seeing with like high severity, low severity, just bugs. Those are always great to fix and put into the next release. We're also trying to keep up with the latest version of Kubernetes so that the latest version of Helm is always available and ready to use for the latest version of Kubernetes. Time to time, there are new features that come into, say, Client Go or to kubectl, and we have those libraries imported into Helm to deal with qconfig finagling and all that. So some of those features need to get rolled in. So, and then we're also accepting some feature requests with a few caveats. When we're talking about new feature requests into Helm 2, we're really looking for small features that are really high value, they're low impact to the entire community, but they do move the project forward in a great way. But if you're working on a feature or you're working on a feature request that is probably a larger architectural change, perhaps it has to deal with some behavioral changes in there, or it's just something that might be useful not just for Helm 2, but maybe even for Helm 3. We'd really love to have you guys and women also in the room who are interested in contributing fixes and all that. We'd love to see you on the mailing list. We'd love to see you on the dev calls, just to make sure that we're all up to sync and we're all working together and PRs are getting merged and moving through. And as well with that, because the engineering team is mostly working on Helm 3, we're trying to not write any new features. We're just working on active maintenance and moving through new things. So, just a little bit of a background story on the project and how we've moved forward from this point. How many people in here have played with Helm 1 or Helm Classic? Wow, okay. We actually have a few people in the room. So for those online, I probably saw maybe less than 10, maybe. But basically, from when we were working on Helm 1, we were developing in a closed source. We were trying to like conceptualize this problem of making a package manager for Kubernetes. We really had no use base. There was no user base at that time. And we were, as a small team, when we first developed it, we were just in a very small room, kind of working together, figuring out kind of the basic concepts, and then going forward with that. Then Helm 2 was starting to work on. We were getting some interested parties. Google had worked on their deployment manager, and they were interested because we were working on some of the similar problems. Bitnami was also interested with some of the stuff as well. So we kind of all worked together, working in a conference room. So it was still a little bit of a closed garden because really there was nobody using Helm at that time when Helm 2 was first released and Helm 1 was going on there. So it was a little bit of an open or closed garden. But now we actually have a lot of people using Helm in production. We have a lot of feedback. We have a lot of use cases and examples and things that we can rely on. So one of our goals has been, as a core maintainers team, to go out and to reach out to the community and hear and understand your use cases and your feedback and everything else. And really, it's trying to turn those into proposals that the entire community can gain from. We can gather about and say, is this the right way that we're moving forward or is not? So we're really moving towards this like open model of trying to move the development to be more of an open process. So I just wanted to thank everyone for all your use cases, all your examples, and everything else that you're showing off. It's been really helpful as a development process, and for me as a developer to actually understand the use cases and the problems, and there's so many. It's great. So, Helm 3, where are we now? Some of the things that we've made in Alpha 1, things that we're interested in doing for Alpha 2 and Alpha 3. So, last week, I think it was Wednesday, was when we made the cut for Helm 3.0.0 Alpha 1. And one of the big features, the simplified client-only architecture, that's actually the removal of tiller. We call it do two different things, but really it's the client-only architecture. We also have rolled into some initial support for OCI registries. OCI, if you don't know the acronym for it, is Open Container Initiative. That's the backing body behind the Docker registry project and the distribution specifications. And what that means essentially is they're the governing body for the pushing and pulling of Docker images, but they're also interested in hosting more than just Docker images. They're interested in arbitrary stuff. So Josh Delitsky, who's not over here, Steve Lasker, who's up in the back there, and a bunch of other people have been working with the Open Container Initiative to see what kind of use cases we can solve this holistically, not just for Helm, but how we can store artifacts on top of Docker registries. So we have initial support in Helm chart push. You can now schematize your values files using a JSON schema. So if you install a chart and you provide values that does not validate against the JSON schema, it'll just bonk out, which can be really helpful for people who are just like, I'm sending in values and I don't know if it'll be validated or it's proper data. So it's nice for chart authors to get that information. And a couple other things, I'll just kind of go through the global namespace in a second, but consolidating charts requirements into chart.yaml, this is just kind of some refactoring code that when we initially released our Helm 2.0, we weren't able to go and make this change when we first introduced this feature, so now we're finally at 3.0, so it's nice to actually go back and do some gardening and pruning and cleaning up. And then as well, some library chart support. So how many people have hit this error before as they're upgrading Helm? Yeah, I bet you have. So this is one of the really nice things about the removal of tiller is that this completely goes away, and I love the fact of this. So that was not only that, but there was many different reasons why we removed tiller. But that was one of the really nice value adds of actually removing tiller, as well as the greatly improved security story. around role-based access controls that have been introduced since 1.6, I think, is when it became GA. All right, don't quote me on that. And then upgrading Helm, like that error that you were just seeing, the getting started, you're not having to do a Helm init to create an upgrade tiller or to do anything like that. So it makes it really easy to get started. You just install the binary and off you go to the races. And the error feedback loop, instead of having to do a client connection to the Kubernetes API and to tiller and to wait for a gRPC response and to get that error feedback loop, because it's all being done in-house inside of the Helm client, it makes it radically simplified for responding to those errors, make it easier. So this is the part that I quickly skipped in the thing, but one of the things was the namespace management was changed. So with the removal of tiller, because there's no such thing as a tiller namespace, what we did was we started to think about how can we think of releases being scoped to the namespace rather than being globally scoped, as in scoped to the tiller instance. So what this means is now when you do a Helm install in a particular namespace, not only is the deployments and the application that you're deploying on there is deployed in that namespace, but also the release records, in this case, what used to be the config map that tiller would store, which is now a secret, those release objects are now stored in the same namespace as the release itself. So now you can actually have multiple releases with the same name in the cluster, but they're scoped at the namespace level. And there's no more kube system usage, so there's no more like cluster level access that you need to actually go and finagle in there. So that was Helm 3 Alpha 1. That's what we currently have in the alpha, and we'd love to have you guys test it out and play with it and get that kind of feedback. Quickly just want to run into Alpha 2 and then Alpha 3. So one of the things that we're interested in playing around with is these kind of advanced use cases that we're seeing with some of the people like at OpenStack and other projects who are interested in doing Helm charts, but they've got a lot of really interesting templating that they're trying to do, and we'd like to see if we can try and make that much simpler with chart hooks and with a proper scripting language. One of the things as well, I think Michelle Nirali has been interested in taking a look at Helm test and getting that feedback from users and seeing what we can do to make that a better abstraction. And again, with the removal of tiller, we can now remove Helm init, and one of the other things, it was just kind of like a nice thing we'd like to do is support the XDG base directory specification, which is when you're creating a client or anything else and you want to store configuration, instead of storing it in your home.helm, the XDG specification actually tells you about the .config directory. If you're on Mac OS, I think it's like library application support. And then on Windows, I think it's in your app data folder. But there's some conventions around the XDG base directory to make it available to store this configuration, not just for one command, but holistically. So it would be nice to support that specification. And then OCI support for all Helm commands. So we have it available in 3.01 is the Helm chart commands themselves. You do Helm chart save, Helm chart push, Helm chart load, export. And then there's the Helm registry login and all those different commands. What we'd like to do is ingrain that and make that available for doing like Helm dependency update or Helm install or Helm upgrade. And you can actually just reference the name of, instead of a stable repository for a chart repository, you can also specify an OCI registry and it would be able to pull that down. So the chart repository is the sub-team again. Josh Delitsky, Steve, and a bunch of other people have been working along on this, so I won't go too much into that again. Alpha 3. So the reason why we split it up into Alpha 2 and Alpha 3 is because we figured some of the features, like the Lua hook system, might be good to get an initial release and actually talk about some of the feedback and all that. But then also, we don't want to hold off on an entire release with a whole bunch of features and just like slog on forever. So we thought maybe we could chunk off the Lua CLI plugin stuff that we're interested in playing around with. And the three-way diff, which is basically a server-side apply or doing a different upgrade merge patch strategy for Helm. And then also playing around with different things like CRDs for release storage or other objects. So all the proposals are all available on GitHub, by the way. I'm just kind of giving these in a high-level overview, so we can go to the Q&A. But if you want to find any of the information on the proposals or the stuff that I'm talking about here, this is all available on the proposals, which is on the Helm community. So why did we want to talk about a better upgrade story for Helm? So currently when you do a Helm upgrade, what it does is it's called a two-way merge patch. And what it does is it takes the difference of your previous release, the last time you did an install or an upgrade, and then it does a diff against what you're currently trying to install or upgrade from there. And it does not take into effect anything that's live in the cluster. So if you do like a kubectl edit on your resources or live patching on that, on like a zero-day exploit or whatever happens to be why you're doing a kubectl edit, that doesn't get applied. And a lot of people obviously really want to have that kind of thing. So early on in Kubernetes 1.2, when Helm 2 was first released, there really wasn't a story around like kubectl apply. Did that exist back then? I'm a little bit past that time. I think I came into the Helm project around 2.4, so I wasn't there for that kind of conversation. But from what I understand, the conversation was around that there was no real story about doing these patches and whatnot. But now, as we're going into like Kubernetes 1.14, eventually we'll go to 1.15 and all that. There's now new initiatives inside of kubectl apply and SIG API machinery, and I think SIG CLI might also be interested in doing some of this, which is the three-way merge patch that kubectl apply currently does. And the server-side apply, which is kind of like an experimental feature of where you apply or you supply a bunch of manifests to Kubernetes itself, and they do the actual diffing and they do the apply, rather than what we currently do, which is the Helm client has to pull down the manifests, do the diffing, and then tell Kubernetes what should be the state. So that's what we like to do. And the other thing as well about changing upgrade is that we can't necessarily treat an individual resource inside of an application the same as we treat another resource. There are relationships between all the different resources that you have inside of your application. Like, for example, if you update a config map or you update a persistent volume, or heavens forbid that you delete your persistent volume claim from there, should that delete your entire persistent volume and all state from your application? I bet most people in here probably don't want to have their application state deleted when they do an upgrade. So that's really what we have to do, is that we have to have these discrete relationships between these different resources inside of the cluster and how we want to treat the upgrade compared to just saying, here's the state, let's do the upgrade here, and well, let's hope for the best. So that is all I really had to say. This is super short, just wanted to give a super high-level overview. So thank you all if you're ever interested in coming, but at this point, what I really would like to do is just have a Q&A where we all just kind of talk about different things and what we're interested in talking about. So thank you. Alrighty, so let's figure this thing out. Yeah, Ivan, thank you. So, anyone have any questions? I see there's one right in the front here. That would be easy.
Yeah, thank you for your talk. It was kind of super nice. So, it's not just a question, maybe. It's just your kind of explanation why it's Lua. I know this is kind of background story, but maybe you can repeat the kind of all the speech stuff why it's Lua instead of Go templates. I mean, a lot of people really love Go templates and kind of use this stuff, but Helm 3 and Lua together. So what's the reason?
So one of the things that I'd love to reiterate and talk about is that the Lua system that we're interested in doing is a value add system. It's not going to replace anything that we're existing to do. One of the things that we really wanted to make as an excessive goal for Helm, or the upgrade from Helm 2 to Helm 3, is full Helm 2 chart support. So it's not like we're going to go and remove Go templates entirely, and we want to do that. We actually want to continue supporting the existing use cases. And there's a lot of value in Go templates and all that. Now, to answer your question about, sorry, I didn't actually answer or ask to the room what was the question. The question was originally, so why Lua and why that? The reason really is going back to the question of there are a ton of charts that are trying to do things in Go templates that really shouldn't be done in Go templates. Like, for example, people who have been defining functions and putting significant business logic inside of their templates in order to do like iterations of arrays or very simple things that the Go template library couldn't do, or even Sprig, which is the underlying function helper library inside of Go template or inside of Helm. They can't handle those use cases, so people tend to put those inside of like defined functions or helpers. It would be really nice, in my point of view, if we could have a way of having a full sandboxed environment for getting access to different libraries that other people inside of the Lua community has like solved. For example, doing like SHA sums of different things, or just iterating over arrays or maps or things like that, and just doing basic string manipulation. And which Go template is really not meant to solve. So it's really just more about those advanced use cases. Yeah, thank you. Yeah. I see a question in the far corner there.
Okay. So one of the issues that we have with the Helm now is that sometimes the first install of a chart fails. And on a production CI/CD pipeline, this is blocking because I cannot repeat the same install right now. Is this something that is changed with Helm 3, or is it still the same issue?
Adam, I saw you like point to, sorry, Taylor, yes, not Adam. I just keep on like looking at core maintainers and everyone looks like Adam. Yes, okay, exactly, so, the replacement Adam.
Yeah, sorry, I'm one of the core maintainers, Taylor. So in answer to that question, you can actually do that now with Helm 2. It was 2.13, yes, 2.13. with the atomic flag. The atomic flag requires the use of the wait flag, so if that's out of your use case, then that might be a little bit different story, but that thing will automatically roll back. Or if it's the first install of a release, it'll delete it, and then do a purge, and then allow you to reinstall it. So it's already there, and I don't think that functionality is going away in Helm 3 based on the code I've seen.
Yeah, so another additional context to put into that is the question of when you're doing an upgrade, do we want to consider a failed upgrade? Do we want to consider actually doing a full deletion of your resources? Or do we want to consider that as a state? And that is a correct state for users to say that if I'm in a failed state, this is a time where I maybe want to intervene and actually take a look on what's available in there. So I mean, like on both cases, really love to solve both of them. And I hope that I think the atomic flag, and then I think there was another community member who was working on another flag that was like clean up on failed resources when you're doing an upgrade. Hopefully both of those flags will really be able to solve those use cases and make that better for that particular case. But at the same time, it's when you're dealing with a failed instance, is it the trade-off that you actually want to delete and start again, or is it actually you want to go and inspect the infrastructure?
This is more of a question to Helm chart maintainers. Is there any plans to introduce versioning in the Helm charts? Every time my team pulls an Nginx ingress chart from the stable...
I'm sorry, I can't really hear you fully clearly. Can you speak up a little bit?
I'll speak up then. Okay, so is there any plan to introduce versioning in the charts, in the stable, for example, charts? For example, when my team, every time that we pull an Nginx ingress from the stable repository, every time we get a different version. And we're a DevOps team, so we need to maintain the same version every single time. So it's been a challenge.
So actually, this has been a really interesting question that I've been, or not me personally, but when the OCI Registry stuff has been going on, one of the interesting things that I actually didn't know about Docker images is that you can reference the image itself by its digest. So internally, the OCI, which Containerd and all of that uses in Docker eventually, or not eventually, it currently does, is that not only can you reference things by their immutable tag, but you can actually reference by the digest at that point in time and when it was released. And that can give you a very, so when instead of doing like an Nginx latest in your images, when you're packaging your app or your chart at that point in time, you can actually reference that digest inside of there, and that makes sure that that content, and you're doing an upgrade or you're doing an install with that chart version, it doesn't get mutated necessarily between upgrades. Does that answer your question?
Just to add, in Helm 2, when you install, just -- version. You have to bring the charts all version, so you can version when you install.
Oh, yeah, as well. So to hear that out, there's also the -- version flag on Helm install. In Helm 2, yeah.
So that should be
Yes.
it should be.
I just
Martin.
wanted to add something. So I'm Martin. I'm a core maintainer as well. Just one thing, what Taylor and Matt were saying a few minutes ago about some fixes that might go in. Just bear in mind that the code was cut off possibly about a year ago. So there may be changes that we'll be pulling up. So if you go to an alpha release of Helm 3, and there might be some capability that's not there that was in 2, just bear in mind, raise an issue or whatever, and we'll get to that. But we're going through the process of pulling up those functionalities. So just bear with us, okay?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, ever since we did that fork, or at least not a fork, but actually removing tiller, there was a significant code change. So if you're finding a bug or something in Helm 2 and you're submitting a patch for that, we'd love to see also it being ported over. Otherwise, we're just porting that fix over as well. So yeah, just a little bit of a hand cleaning.
I'd understood there were some potential integrations with Notary in Helm. I was wondering if you could say anything about that.
Oh, so I think one of the things that we had started talking about was signing the release binaries that's happening inside of Helm. And when we were coming up to this and realizing that our releases were not signed and we're not actually doing a proper attestation with our release objects, we started to kind of like shift into where we're going to GPG sign all our releases for now, because we need to do, if we were to stand up Notary, we have to actually have that infrastructure in place. So one of the things that would be really nice and to see to integrate with Helm 3 in our release pipeline is to actually like stand up a Notary instance so we can make sure that the releases or the release assets that we're releasing to the public are all signed and everything else. Rather than myself, and Martin is also quite well aware of this because he did the 2.14 release. He had to GPG sign every single release and upload it to GitHub. It's a little bit, little finicky. So we'd like to have that automated. Automate ourselves out of a job.
Hi. So I was wondering, I've seen some things about deploying a Helm chart, not with the chart version, but with the API version. I was wondering if that may come in Helm 3 or is something to be planned to be put into Helm later on.
So your reference, so the question is, can we install a Helm chart based on the API version, which is the chart specification, right? Or are you talking about the app version? Because there.
Yeah, sorry, app version. Yeah, yeah.
So the app version is an interesting one because that was, I think that was added around 2.9 or 2.10 into Helm, and so that wasn't originally a core concept of Helm. It was just the chart version itself, and the app version was really about like making it visually available to web UIs that when you were installing this chart, you're actually going to get like WordPress at this certain revision. So it wasn't like made part of the upgrade release prior. It would be an interesting question to talk about that though, because you could potentially have, well, you could have multiple chart versions that are constantly revving up, but they reference the same app version. So we've been kind of saying like chart version plus app version is your unique key. That would be an interesting question. Actually, maybe if you're interested, that could be an interesting proposal to talk about as like an issue or put that up on there. So we haven't actually thought about that, but it would be great to have those kind of like use cases and understand that problem. Yeah.
So you mentioned that with Helm 3 you will scope charts to
release namespaces. But
sorry, can you speak up just a little bit?
Sorry.
Thank you.
So you mentioned that in Helm 3 you will scope charts to release namespaces, but will be allowed to, for example, require charts from another namespace.
So why the charts?
Cross namespace requirements or something like that. That I'm deploying a namespace A, but I'm deploying a namespace B, but I require from another.
You know, this part of the architecture, I am not too familiar on like the cross-chart namespace and the understanding of those use cases. I haven't necessarily dealt with that myself, so I really would not be the qualified person. Probably Adam, who's unfortunately was not able to make it here, or Matt Butcher, or some others. So I would, like, if you want to ask that in like the Helm dev channel or in the user channel, that would be a great question to ask in there. I'm sorry, I can't really answer that question for you.
Okay, no problem, thanks.
Oh, apparently Jessica has a comment about that.
So I don't know for sure how the dependency part tool works, but I can tell you, oh, sorry.
Here comes Ivan to save the day.
Hi. If for anyone who was in the session about Helm 3, I did a demo where I talked about namespaces and I kind of showed different deployments. So I had 3 different charts in that demo, one of which I also was a certificate issuer. And then that certificate issuer was part of the Jetpack cert manager, or sorry, not certificate issuer, I'm very tired, cert manager, and that was actually in the kube system namespace. But every other deployment was part of the default namespace, and for me to still make sure that I was issued TLS certificates, which unfortunately I could not show in the demo, but I have working now, it still issues even though there's charts across different namespaces. So I can tell you that it works. What I don't know and what I think we'll need to get clarification on is if you have security policies in place and you have a lockdown. But from an open perspective, I didn't do any additional configuration. I just deployed as normal. I had namespaces, I had 3 different charts and 3 different namespaces. They still were able to pull the resources that they needed to pull, even though there was cross namespace Helm chart releases.
So we are 4 minutes prior to time to finish, so I think we're good for maybe 1 or maybe 2 more questions before we have to finish up here. By the way, thank you, Ivan, for running around and doing this. This is great. So 3 cheers for Ivan.
I think in Helm 3, Alpha 3, you're bringing in Lua plugins. Can we still use existing plugins in the sort of current format as they are, or would we need to rewrite these plugins in Lua?
No, again, like the whole Go template and Lua thing as well, like I think we'll be handling it the exact same way with Lua plugins. It's not necessarily we're going to replace the existing plugin system that we have as is. It's just another way to write plugins in a different system. So instead of having to like compile them down into binaries or something like that, if we have the Lua engine in, we could potentially just have a Lua script and make that as a plugin and inject that into the CLI if you wanted to execute a command. So it's just another cool way to potentially do that. Really? Right.
But that is up to you if you want to change it to that and pick up from the capabilities. You will also see slight changes when you do a Helm create and use the scaffold command. We will structure the charts as per the new spec board. As Matt said, they're a stable all the way, and if you do it, that's the option as well. So the key part here is that basically your charts can sit wrong.
Yeah. The key part is that we're trying to make sure that we're going with not entirely full compatibility with the Helm 2 system, but where we can make sense, keep Helm 2 that works, and then just keep on adding from there and keep adding value. Are you done? Yes.
Can you give us some good examples around the usage of the chart libraries or the library charts?
Oh.
Like especially in the case that was mentioned today when you want to apply policies across multiple subcharts, for example, in your parent chart.
Yeah, actually, so Jessica and Bridget did a talk it was about an hour and a half ago. And one of the things that was really could have been a really handy use case in there is, for example, if you want to make sure that all the charts that you're deploying in your organization is interested in injecting a pod security policy in all your things, that is an abstractable piece of work that you can add into a library chart. So backing up just a quick minute, a library chart, from what we understand in the current alpha system right now, is it's the exact same as an existing chart, except that when we actually go to rendering the chart and going to install it, the chart itself does not render any templates at all. The only things that we're caring about is the define templates, which is the functions that it provides. So you could see the system where if we're interested in implementing a function that only injects like pod security policies into all your deployments, then you could introduce a library chart as a dependency that provided that function for them. And you could actually use that inside your Go templates to call that function, and your pod security policy will be applied for your organization, or just convenience functions, for example, or something like that. So, and potentially, if the Lua chart system actually turns out that way and could work with that, that would be potentially an interesting use case. But again, this is just spitballing. So,
yeah, just to add to that, what we've also done is we've added a type into a chart. So a chart can be of two types now. It can be an application and a library chart. And why we've done that is because the library chart concept has been there for a while. But what we're doing now with the idea of is that it's no core functionality. And what you can do with your chart is you may have a normal application chart, but you may have capability in that where you put common capability in, and you might want to use it in another chart. So what you can then is define the chart as a library chart, and none of the templates that would normally be rendered would be rendered in that situation, just the chart that you're extending, basically. So have a look in the docs. We'll be updating them more on that, but there is some nice functionality if you look for the common library chart, etc. And another example to what Matt said there was, and I've seen someone in the community did this, so if you're here, come over to me. It was a really nice concept where they took the different labels that you define, and they put them into their, they defined them inside in their helper files, so that basically if people in your company was writing charts and you wanted to make sure that they put all the proper K8 labels in, you'd have that capability for them, and it could be loaded straight up into their template files when they're writing it. So.
Right. All right. I think we are at time. So thank you everyone for coming along.